Well, hello there. Welcome back to the channel. My name is James, and here at 20th and 21st Movies, we are about all things cinema. Well, I wanted to take a few minutes today to share with you my thoughts on a title that when it was first announced from Criterion back in November 2021, that they would be releasing this title in February 2022. I was really excited about this title, and I was excited not because I had heard the film before, because I hadn't. I had never heard of this film before, nor had I ever heard of this director. I was excited because of the subject matter of Boat People. So this is Boat People. This is the 1982 film from director Ann Hui, Hong Kong director Ann Hui, and it comes in at spine number 1113 in the Criterion Collection. So spine number 1113, this is the front of the title. Very interesting cover for this release from the Criterion Collection. And this is the back of it. But this cover captures a really poignant moment in this film. And when you see it, you're like, oh, okay, cool. It's just, this is an amazing film. And for me, the reason that I got excited about this film when it was announced to be released by Criterion wasn't because I had heard about it or knew anything about it. It was because of the subject matter. It deals with the aftermath of the Vietnam War and refugees seeking to leave the country of Vietnam after the Vietnam War ended with the fall of Saigon in 1975, where the North Vietnamese took over Saigon, renamed it Ho Chi Minh City, and basically the communist side of North Vietnam won the conflict, so to speak. The United States was out and the war was over, and it left a lot of people in Vietnam looking for some other place to be. So you had Vietnamese refugees who were looking to leave and get out of that situation. And so this movie deals with the aftermath of the Vietnam War, how these people lived and the situations that they were in and the way that they were treated by this North Vietnamese regime that had taken over, and the attempts that they took to get out of this really bad situation. So that's really what Boat People is largely about. Of course, you have two main characters in this film. You have George Lam. He plays a man named Shiomi Akutagawa. He is a Japanese photojournalist. So he's a Japanese photojournalist in Vietnam, basically capturing and journaling the events around the people in this area who are living in the aftermath of this post-war era in Vietnam. And he was capturing their life. And the interesting thing about it is the North Vietnamese government did not want him to portray a realistic vision of what was going on. They tried to set up sort of fake situations, like situations where he would be with these school children and showing them singing and being happy and capturing those moments, but not really capturing what life was really like for the people, so to speak. So they were steering him down a path of covering the footage in a certain way, or maybe not even covering the footage at all. And he was trying to get the real story. So you had that tug of war of true journalism versus a government that is seeking to censor true journalism and portray things a certain way to the world. So I just found that dynamic very interesting. But basically, George Lam is playing this photojournalist, this Japanese photojournalist who's in Vietnam trying to get the story of what life is really like in post-war Vietnam. And this other character here is played by an actress named Saison Ma. So it's spelled season, but I think the way to pronounce her name might be Saison Ma. And she plays a character named Cam Nuong. And she is the oldest sister in a family of, she has two younger brothers, and she lives with her mother. And they are part of this group of people who are just caught up in this horrible situation in post-war Vietnam, and they befriend each other. And he covers their lives and the lives of other people in the area. And it's just a story about the plight of people in post-war Vietnam. And that's really what piqued my interest about this particular film, is the fact that it covers this particular aspect of our history, and that is the Vietnam War. And it's an area of history that has fascinated me for so long. And any film that deals with the Vietnam War, whether it shows the Vietnam, whether it shows conflict or shows the war itself, or is a documentary about the war, like Hearts and Minds is in the Criterion Collection, or even if it's a film like Forrest Gump, where Forrest Gump spends part of his time in Vietnam and is shown in a serious way, but also in a comical way. I can appreciate films that give me a glimpse of what the Vietnam War might have been like, whether it's a true documentary or whether it's a film representation or portrayal of that conflict. And so this particular film deals with the aftermath of the war. So that's really what fascinated me about this title and why I definitely wanted to pick it up as part of day one when it came out from the Criterion Collection. And I'm so glad that I did. This is a title from director Ann Hui. She's a director from Hong Kong. And I have to tell you, I had never heard of Ann Hui before, but having gone through this title and gone through this edition from Criterion, she's definitely on my radar because I think she definitely has a voice. And you learn so much about Ann Hui in this edition from the Criterion Collection. So overall, as far as the story and the movie, I love this film. I love this movie from the historical perspective in how it gives a glimpse of what life was like in post-war Vietnam. Of course, part of my fascination for the Vietnam War and my appreciation for it is the fact that my father served in the Vietnam War. My dad was in the United States Army. He served in the military and he was in Vietnam, and he fought in Vietnam as well as parts of Cambodia. So, of course, as you may know, the Vietnam War lasted nearly 20 years from 1955 to 1975, and it ended with the fall of Saigon. So you had the North Vietnamese who were backed by the Russians and the Chinese, and you had the South Vietnamese who were backed by the United States. And it was basically a proxy war between the United States and Russia and China that was taking place over that 19 plus year period from 1955 to 1975. It all culminated with, in 1975, the fall of Saigon. The United States pulls out. And as a result, you have a lot of these people who are, in Vietnam at that time, refugees in the South Vietnamese areas who are thinking, okay, now is a good time to get out of Dodge. And they become refugees and seek to leave the country. That's why the title, I guess, is called Boat People, because they left on these boats and they would go to different landing spots, Malaysia and different areas. And I think that's a story in and of itself as well. That would be interesting to see more about in terms of what happened to a lot of these Vietnamese refugees who left Vietnam and landed in Malaysia in different parts, different areas. And many of them, of course, died along the way. So there's a lot of stories in that as well. So it's just all part of what I think is a very fascinating piece of world history and a fascinating piece of U.S. history, all things the Vietnam War. So that's what really fascinated me about this particular title and why I had to pick it up from the Criterion Collection. And I'm so happy that I did. And this is, to cut to the chase, a great addition. This movie is absolutely fantastic. It gives you a vision into a piece of history that I really appreciate, and that's part of why I picked it up. So I got that out of it, and it gave me a glimpse into something that I didn't really know much about, because you hear a lot about Vietnam and the war, but you don't really hear as much about the aftermath. And part of that aftermath, as sort of laid out in this story, is, and part of the legacy of Vietnam, is the fact that many years after the Vietnam War has ended, people are still suffering injuries and death as a result of the bombs that were planted, the mines that were planted in various places of Vietnam. A lot of children and people up to this day, nearly 50 years later, are still being killed by these bombs. And you have a lot of people who are involved in landmine cleaning operations throughout that country to try to, free the country of the landmines that still are there today as a legacy of the Vietnam War. So A lot of interesting stuff in this story that I definitely came away with an appreciation of from a historical standpoint. So this film is amazing. As far as the video and audio presentation, let me talk about that for a second. So on here, you get a new restored 4K digital transfer, and I believe it says it was approved by director Ann Hui. So we get a restored 4K digital transfer, and you get an uncompressed monaural soundtrack. So let me just say right off the bat, as far as the AV presentation, this film looks and sounds great. I was actually very surprised at how good this film looks. I mean, this film looks absolutely amazing in high definition. And that's one of the things that I walked away very impressed with, just how good this film looked. I mean, it looks very sharp, very detailed. The colors come across really well. It makes me wonder how good this film could look on a 4K disc. I mean, which I don't think we'll be getting anytime soon, but I can only say that I'm very impressed overall with the Blu-ray presentation of this film. This film looks really great, even in the night scenes. I just sat there watching the night scenes, which there are many of, and just seeing the depth in the image, right? That you had the main characters and subjects, they were separated from the background. You could clearly make them out, even in dark scenes. You could see a fair amount of detail even in those dark scenes. And just things just looked really detailed and defined. And you had what I felt was a good amount of three-dimensionality in the image. So the image quality looks really good on this Blu-ray. And I think they did a really nice job with the restoration for this film from 1982. So that's one of the things I was very impressed with, was the video and audio presentation. I wasn't expecting it to look this good. So very nice looking Blu-ray, and the sound is also very nice. Now, as far as the special features, I think the special features are really what makes this title, Boat People, for me, an early contender for my top 10 of the year. So this is, as far as supplements, I have to say I was very impressed, because they have a number of interviews and documentaries on here that really help you better understand more about Ann Hui. As I said before, I had never heard of Ann Hui before I picked up this edition from the Criterion Collection. Never heard of her before. I didn't know anything about her or any of her films. But by the time you go through this edition and you go through the interviews and the documentaries that talk a lot about Ann Hui's life, her background, her early days in Hong Kong and her growing up in Hong Kong, and her parents and her sisters and brothers, and just getting a chance to hear from them, from her siblings and their experiences growing up. You really learn a lot about Ann Hui, the woman. You learn a lot about her as a person, about her in the context of her family, about what inspired her to become a filmmaker, about the books that she read that inspired her, and just her beginnings in Hong Kong. You see the neighborhood she lived in, and, back from, say, 30 years ago, and as well as you see it today. And it's really a fascinating look at this director's life that you get from these special features. So you have a new conversation between Hui and filmmaker Stanley Kwan, who was the film's assistant director. That was a very fascinating conversation, a modern conversation between the two. Then you get Keep Rolling, which is a 2020 documentary about Hui by Man Lim Chung, Hui's longtime production designer and art director. This is a documentary from 2020, and it is, I get myself confused. I'm not sure if this is the 2-hour documentary or the 1-hour documentary, but you get two big documentaries on here. One is 2 hours and one is 1 hour. So you get like 3 hours of documentaries about Ann Hui in this film. One is Keep Rolling, which is the new documentary, which is very good. And the picture quality looks absolutely amazing. And you see some beautiful lush greenery in the areas that they're shooting in. And it's just fantastic. But then you have the 1997 documentary In Self-Portrait by Hui, produced by Peggy Chow. Now, this 1997 documentary is pretty rough in the way that it looks. It looks like it was shot on a camcorder, but there's a lot of rich material in there because you're hearing from Ann Hui, you're seeing where she grew up, you're seeing her background, you're seeing the places that she would eat in and talk about the films that she was making and her inspiration for her work. So you're just seeing different aspects of her life played out. And I really appreciated both of these documentaries because for a person that knew nothing about Ann Hui going into this edition from Criterion, I walk away feeling like I feel like I know Ann Hui a lot better. Now, of course, I don't know Ann Hui personally and probably never will know her personally, but you walk away feeling like you know her a little bit more having gone through this edition from Criterion. And that's part of what I think makes this an outstanding release, not only with this film being a great historical record, but the supplements really helping you understand who this filmmaker is, what her vision is, where does she come from, who is she, who is Ann Hui. You get that from these supplements, and I really appreciate that. You also have the press conference from the 1983 Cannes International Film Festival, which was phenomenal. I mean, that was a really nice interview because you had a woman on there who was interviewing Ann Hui and George Lamb, who was the actor who played the main lead in this film. And they were talking about the film. And of course, the film came out with a fair amount of controversy. So what happened was this film was a film that was sort of exposing the communist regime in Vietnam at that time. And a lot of people didn't like that. And so you had this film being part of the Cannes Film Festival and France being involved because Vietnam used to be a colony of France. So the people in France didn't want to upset the people in Vietnam. So as a result, this film was not shown in certain areas of the Cannes Film Festival. So it was sort of put to the side, so to speak. And so in this press conference, you had Ann Hui and George Lamb talking about the film, talking about their philosophy of the film and their approach, and basically defending their work and defending what they had put together for this film that was critically acclaimed, but came out with a fair amount of controversy because of the politics involved in that area, in that time. So inside, let's look inside here. Because inside, this is what you get. Of course, here you see this really nice menu screen. I always check out menu screens of Criterion's, and this is a static menu screen, but it captures a really nice moment. And I love that menu screen. I dig it. The only thing that would probably make it better would be a moving animated screen, but I think this is perfectly fine. But inside here, look at this. Very nice. I really, really like this art here. This comes at a very important point in the film. So let me take this book out. This is a very important scene in the film. They're out in the field. You have kids in the field here. And you have George Lamb's character and Saison Mau's character out there looking for her little brother at the time. So really, really nice scene there. So I love this picture on the inside. And you get this nice stapled booklet, which is nice. And I love this picture on here. And in this stapled booklet, you get some information about the cast and crew, of course. And then you get a couple of very fascinating essays. One is by Justin Chang called Persistence of Vision, which is a very good essay. Both of these essays are excellent. And then by Vin Nguyen, Becoming Refugees. So again, both of these essays are excellent. They talk about Ann Hui, they talk about the film Boat People, and they talk about the general historical context that this film covers. So just an absolutely nice booklet with some nice pictures from the film. And of course, you get some information about the transfer. And the transfer, it says, Boat People is presented in its original aspect ratio of 1.85 to 1. Restoration was undertaken by the Criterion Collection. This new digital transfer was created in 4K resolution on an Arriscan film scanner from the 35mm original camera negative. The monaural soundtrack was remastered from the original 35mm soundtrack negative. So what can I say? I mean, the picture quality, as I said before, is something that I was pretty shocked by in terms of how good this film looks on this Blu-ray. And I think Criterion did an amazing job with the restoration. And overall, this is a very nice addition from the Criterion Collection. So in terms of what I recommended, I would say if you have an interest in history, in U.S. history, in the Vietnam War, if you are interested in the events around the Vietnam War, the aftermath of the war, and that piece of U.S. history and world history, pick this up. Highly, highly recommended. The film is good. It looks great and sounds great in high definition. And you also learn so much about Ann Hui, the director, that I think you would really appreciate. So this is an edition that's definitely on my radar for top 10 list of the year. So we have a long way to go for the year, but this is an edition that I wouldn't be surprised if it found its way somewhere on my top 10 list, but we shall see. There's a whole lot of the year left and a whole lot of editions coming out, but this one is a really nice edition that's come out from the Criterion Collection that I was very impressed with. Boat People, the 1982 film from director Ann Hui. Definitely recommended. So let me know in the comments below if you've seen Boat People, if you've seen other films from Ann Hui. Let me know what films you've seen from Ann Hui that has impressed you and what films you would recommend. And also let me know what other editions from Criterion you are excited about picking up here in these coming months, in the months of March, April, and May. And also, what the heck, what titles are you hoping that we will hear about from Criterion soon, whether in 4K or Blu-ray upgrades? Let me know your thoughts on Criterion in the comments below. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time at the movies. Peace.